Hello, and welcome to The Modern Romantic, where we celebrate and inspire romanticism through many creative outlets and passionate artistic people. I am your host, Emily, tonight, and Trey is not with us because he's having internet problems. So I'm here with Josh tonight, our moderator and fellow producer. And
Hello.
yes, say hello. Sorry. So sorry.
Hello. That's all good.
And Trey has sent a recorded message to us to play, so I'm going to play that first so you can hear from him. Hopefully everybody can hear it. Ready?
And welcome to the Modern Romantic Podcast, where we celebrate romanticism through art, storytelling, and creative people doing incredible things. Hello, I am coming to you not live from a recorded message on my phone because I am without an internet connection at the moment. I will rejoin you next week, hopefully with a very stable internet connection. Hi, Emily.
Okay, so he basically just said hi. I don't know if you guys could hear, but I think our audience could. Anyway, today we are here chatting with the founder and creator of Fell and Fair, which is one of the coolest on and offline communities. It's a multimedia company and an adventurous creative giant. A good giant, though, like the kind you want to have as a friend. So, hobbits and Numenorians and giants, I present to you Zan Campbell. Yay!
Thank you.
Welcome, guys.
Really happy to be here. So, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. We're thrilled to have you here, too. You were in our magazine a couple years ago, the Modern Romantic magazine. We did a little interview, and we had pictures, and it was very cool. And yes, Kaz in the chat, she's saying, wait, Fell and Fair, like the company Fell and Fair. Yes, that is Zan. So Zan, tell us how you got started. Yes.
Sure. Yeah, it's like, how do you stumble your way into being a full-time professional Viking warlord?
Right.
That's a good question. Yeah. So honestly, from when I would. The smallest child, a stick was a sword, and my mother tried to restrain us, and she that was a losing battle, unfortunately, from the very beginning, mainly because we were the ones that had the swords. But the I always, just when I was really young, was just inspired by books and movies and stories about especially medieval and fantasy settings. And I think it's because it's such a rich, just fertile territory for storytelling. Because there's some things we know, and there's some things that we kind of have a good feeling for and we can relate to, and then there's so much mystery, and every Arthurian novel starts, well, the knights rode into the woods and they found adventure, because there was this kind of air of mystery and this sort of stuff. So I just really love that. And then, of course, I was 11 years old when The Fellowship of the Ring came out, so prime formation age for Lord of the Rings. And then I remember sitting in my grandparents' guest bedroom. They had a TV in there. It was one of those TVs that had the little the cassette player in the not the cassette player, but the TV tape player in the VHS player in the TV.
Yeah.
And we would watch the behind the scenes from the Lord of the Rings, the hours and hours and hours of those behind the scene documentaries. And I remember even then just being just overawed, because this wasn't something that they just faked. I mean, obviously they faked it, but it wasn't something that Viggo Mortensen knew how to ride horses, and he would carry a sword just around, just so he would look natural carrying a sword. And I love that authenticity, because it was storytelling, but on a level where the storytellers were so committed. They weren't just trying to make a buck. They weren't just trying to find one creative outlet. They were meshing all these creative outlets and creative skills together in order to tell this really compelling story that has inspired people for years, and it inspired a whole new generation. And so as I remember at the time I was in drama, in our local drama. We were doing Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, actually. And they gave us these wooden swords, and I was like, well, we can do better than this. So I went to Home Depot with my granddad and got some foil tape, and I went and taped all the blades so they looked like they were steel. And just I was 11, 12 years old, but I was like, I can do that. I can make this look better. So let me take something that's cheap and make it a little better with a little bit of elbow grease. And so that, as we got older, we continued to do drama. And then I had a lot of friends interested in film. And I was never, at least early on, I was never the person originating that stuff. But they knew that I was the guy with swords. So if you wanted, I was that kid that had swords. And so they would come to me, hey, we're doing this. night one, or we're doing this Scottish video or something, do you have a sword for that? And if I didn't, I would acquire one. And
awesome.
So eventually it got to the point where I was doing all these student films and that sort of stuff. And my next step in wanting to bring the authenticity to this was doing medieval archery. But I didn't want to do archery like you go to Walmart and you get the fiberglass arrows and the fiberglass bow. I want to do archery the way Robin Hood did archery. Like I wanted wooden arrows, and I wanted a wooden longbow, and I wanted real goose fletchings on them. But at the time, like this was like 2008, like Etsy was it was around, but it wasn't very big. There weren't a whole lot of places you could buy this stuff. So I had to learn how to make it all myself. And I got really invested in the art and craft of making an arrow. And, because you can make them to spin in different ways. You can make them to bend around the bow, like all this sort of stuff. I kind of overdid it. And I ended up with about 500 arrows.
Wow.
Yeah. And they weren't cheap either. They cost about $5 to $6 to make a piece. So,
oh yeah,
I went out. It was overboard.
So
but
you dig into the Port Orford cedar shafts and all of that kind of stuff.
Yep, exactly. I had special jigs for everything I could do.
Yep.
So I had all those arrows, and then one summer in between years of college, I was like, you know what? I think it's time we need to take all these arrows and do something. So what do you do with 500 medieval arrows? You go film a Robin Hood short film. And then
Heck yeah.
One of the frustrations I had was we would do these student films, and a lot of times I wouldn't see the final version because they were student film and they would just be presented to the class and we'd never get to see it, or it would never get edited. So I got about 15 friends together and I said, we're going to film something. We're going to film it over a weekend. I will edit it and get it to you on DVD the next weekend. Or so like that, like we will shoot them and edit them in a week. So I bought a whole computer to edit it. And we did, I think, 7 of those episodes over the next 3 years.
Cool.
And that was a lot of fun. And that's where we started learning and adding in the different skills of costume design. Because at first we were just buying stuff, but then we started making stuff, and I started doing some of the leather work, and started learning how to assemble different pieces of costume and how they work together and how color palettes worked and all that sort of stuff. And then this whole time I was at university. I was in the Naval ROTC program. I graduated, became an officer in the Navy, went to flight school, and became a naval aviator. But something about military life is there's a lot of hurry up and wait. And so it would, you would be gone for 2 months. You wouldn't be home at all. And you'd earn all this extra pay that you can't spend. And then you'll get home and they'll be like, yeah, you're done at noon for like a week. So I would just have these blocks of time where I would have 8-10 hours a day and like $4,000 I didn't know what to do with. So I would just start crafting new things. And because I didn't have a community to do anything with, I just started. That was when Instagram was like, it was about art. It wasn't news and celebrity stuff. It was for people who did cool photography and stuff. Yeah. And then I started sharing that stuff on Instagram, and I started forming this community and connecting with different people that way. And then when I got out of the Navy, I was actually ended up being medically retired when I was 25. And so I basically DM'd a bunch of people, and I was actually so sick at the time I couldn't even get a job. And so I was like, well, I'm going to try to make a go at this being a job, because people were starting to pay me for commissions, and I was starting to work with some YouTubers and this sort of stuff. And then I emailed or DM'd about 20 people on Instagram, said, hey, do you want to come to a cabin in the woods in South Carolina? We're going to hang out with bladed weapons and take photos and, eat s'mores and stuff. And about 12 of them said, yeah, sure, we'll come. And which they were insane, but they got them down there. And that kind of formed what we called the Fell Company, which is just this group of people who were blacksmiths and photographers and costumers and just people of different skills, but had a shared passion for story. And with that, we started kind of an annual gathering from that. And then we started collaborating with all the different people who were craftsmen and artists. And I think from the people we kind of attracted in the first 2 years, there's now like 7 of us that are full-time professionals in our craft. When we were all just, kids in college or right out of college who were, working at the grocery store or whatever, just to kind of, make it. And now we got a bunch of folks who are, full-time artists because of this. Not because of this, but, this community, I think, has helped and supported and encouraged. It was their own skill and artistic talent that got them what they got. But so yes, that was kind of how Fell and Fair started. And then we were working a lot on doing social media stuff. We were doing things for YouTubers and indie films and stuff. And then people kept saying, we love these photos that we see. We love the kits. Like, how do we get outfits like that? And our answer was kind of like, well, can't, because we made them. So people started saying, well, we'll pay you to make them. So we said, okay. So we got kind of our top 5 to 10 items that people were requesting a lot, or that we used a lot. And we created an Etsy store. We said, these are like our basics. These are our costuming, our real medieval garments that are Hollywood level, but they're simple and they are functional. And here you go. And that's grown and grown and grown to where we now have hundreds of items, and we have a whole shop and a whole company that's just based around that side. But then people started buying those. They started seeing the content online. They started buying the clothing, and they said, well, we have all this awesome clothing now. What do I do with it? Because, like, I can go to my Ren Fair and that's fun, but like, I want to live this stuff the way I see you guys live it. So we were invited to help start an event called Weekend Warrior. And that kind of was our first live action event that we got to bring people and rallied people together to. And that slowly kind of built and has grown to where we now have 4 different events a year, a big Weekend Warrior event, 2 smaller Weekend Warrior events. We do our Party of Special Magnificence, which is kind of a halfling birthday celebration. And so we also have the event company as well now that just does the, kind of experiential entertainment, experiential immersive events. So that's the story of Felon Fair and Weekend Warrior and everything.
Yeah. One of the questions in the chat is it possible for one to join Felon Fair? So I'm assuming that one of these immersive events or Weekend Warrior is the best way to do that, but
yes.
Would you agree?
Yeah, there occasionally if you follow our social media, we'll put out, when we're hiring, we always post on social media. But I would say 70% of our staff we met through Weekend Warrior. And then, we connected and were able to see some of their talent and they were, involved that way. But definitely Weekend Warrior, it's weekendwarriorexperience.com is the website. Highly recommend checking it out and kind of being part of that. And that'll get you connected with the community, because one thing that we started realizing was, as we have hundreds of thousands of followers across the platform, like I realized, and I think every entrepreneur and business owner eventually realizes, I can't do it all myself. Like I can't have one-on-one contact with as much as I would love to, with every follower at every event. I'll see pictures of Weekend Warrior this last year, but I never saw that person. I had no idea they were there. But they had contact with people, and they spent a whole weekend in community with people that were like them and engaged with things that they love. And I never even saw them, that's success. That's phenomenal, because it means it's beyond just Zan and his friends doing stuff. It's now this community that's self-sustaining. And so, that's kind of the way that we recommend. If you want to get involved in the community, that's how you get to know people. That's how you find these people that have common interests.
Kaz, who asked that question, said that Weekend Warrior is a goal, and she follows Felon Fair on every platform you're on. And earlier in the chat, she also said that your cloaks are amazing to ride a horse in, and they balance so well they don't fall just to one side, which I think is a huge plus. And Kaz herself makes horse armor, so awesome. I could see why she would want to be involved.
Yeah, no, that matters a lot. And yeah, one of the things that was really, really important to us from the very beginning was, it goes back to that holistic idea of these are the people that actually do the stuff. So we're not just models that just throw it on and take it off. Not there's anything wrong with modeling. And then we're not just the designers or sewers who just manufacture it, but we're the people that wear it, and we're the people that make it. So we run around and we get choked by the clothing thing. Well, that doesn't work. How can we improve that?
That's a big deal too.
We've had tunics, fall apart on us, and we've had, all these problems that people run into. So we, because we were the people that were out in the field running around in the woods, sometimes those are, practical solutions that we can build into the design of things. Some of those are, okay, well, we just have to think about how we do this better. So, for example, whenever we do our ranger stuff, the way we designed our quivers, it actually kind of holds everything to our back. And so it keeps the cloak from running back and choking us. It kind of keeps everything forward. So even like adding things like that, like we couldn't solve that problem directly with the cloak, but we were able to find other ways because we ran around in the woods long enough, basically.
Sure. It's like battle tested.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, literally, in the case of Weekend Warrior, minus the, any sort of bloodshed, thankfully. But yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you have 7 full-timers. Is that right?
Oh no, we're at 12.
I don't know where I got that number then. What types of crafters and artisans are on your staff then?
Sure. So our largest section is our sewing department. So Kat Marchant does a phenomenal job leading that. And she does manages a team of about 6-7 people. And that is cutting, serging, sewing, even washing and ironing. We have a team member named Mosley, and like her job, like she irons all day long. And then her other job is she sets. So we have a lot of garments that are combos of like the linen or wool and then leather. So her job. She's like the integration person. She puts the leather on the fabric. So whether those are cloak tabs or whatever, she does a phenomenal job doing that. So then we have a leather department. So when we have leather armor, belts, leather accessories, bags, they do that. Those guys also double over for warehouse. So they help manage all our inventory. They help set up for events and load stuff out and unload it and pull armor and kits for when people rent stuff or when we do rent the costumes for movies or films or for events. And then we actually have a wig brand called Pose Wigs. So that was kind of a natural step of like, we want to integrate the full costume, especially when you're doing fantasy stuff. Cause if you want to look like an elf, but you don't have long hair, or any hair, it's
in my case, right.
It's a great option. And then, so Lauren K. Humphrey runs that and does a great job. And she's got some folks that help her with that. And then we have kind of our administrative team, Amy Robinson, kind of helps manage the operations of everything. And she's kind of a jack of all trades and kind of keeps everybody moving and going together. Now there's some skills that we kind of use or have access to, but we don't do ourselves. For example, our blacksmith is Charlie Ellis. He was one of those guys that he's actually the first person that I ever met through Instagram, because I was scrolling through Instagram in 2012 and I saw this guy forging knives. I was like, well, everybody forges knives. I saw a guy forge a sword. I was like, that's kind of cool. And then I saw him swinging that sword, chopping pumpkins up while wearing armor. He also forged. It's like, I have to meet this man. And it turned out that he lived like an hour from my parents' house. Right. So when I went home over Christmas, we actually met. And the way we had it was my sister and another friend actually met him at the house when he pulled up. And me and all my friends were in the woods in our like medieval ranger outfits. And so and my sister and our other friend are dressed as elves. And he has like an elf armor and stuff. So he puts all his armor and he walks with these two random girls he just met down into the woods along this trail, about a quarter of a mile. And then he comes into this clearing, and our arranged signal was we were going to do, it was like this double whistle kind of signal. And the thing is my sister's been doing this. Like we also didn't tell my sister, because she was the one leading him, what the signal was going to be. But she's been doing this long enough that she started getting those hairs on the back of your neck. And so she walks into that clearing and she gives the signal accidentally. She kind of uses it to communicate. And then all our rangers pop down and we all have our bows and arrows. And then we like kind of greet the elf. And he traded me a knife for like 24 arrows that I made him specially that matches armor and stuff.
Oh, cool.
And then we went into the forest and had a feast and hung out for the rest of the afternoon, took a bunch of photos. And that was over 10 years ago.
Wow.
And now he's a full-time blacksmith and does phenomenal work. And anyway, so whenever, like, for example, all of our specially made aluminum combat swords are made by Charlie. So he doesn't work with us every day in the shop, unfortunately, but we do get to have access to his craftsmanship.
We interviewed Charlie for the magazine
Charlie's
too.
Pretty awesome.
Oh yeah.
We interviewed him before you, and it was interesting because I was like, I found him on Instagram. That's how that came about. And I was like, so when I'm talking to him, I was like, so tell me some of the stuff you do with the knives and things you make. And he was like, oh, well, sometimes I join Zan and the folks over at Felon Fair because they live real close, or they're real close. And I was like, really, you do? I was like, I had no idea the connection even existed. Yeah. And so I was talking to him about like maybe, because I do photography, about coming down and like doing photography with him and his stuff. And I had no idea, like he was already part of this giant, awesome thing. And, but he is awesome and his work is awesome. And we have, with a friend, I made armor for Josh here that has a couple of Charlie's leaf buckles.
Nice.
That are really cool.
Yeah.
And
very cool.
Yeah, his work is great. So yeah, I'm glad you brought up Charlie. That was cool. Yeah. I was going to ask about how you two met, but that's a wonderful story.
That's
through an elven ambush in the woods in Anderson, South Carolina. Yeah.
There's no story that tops that for me.
That's awesome.
Well, the only one, maybe Nick Bruno, who he's our photographer and does a lot of he's our prime photographer, does so much good work. But the way I found him was I was once again scrolling through Instagram one day, and I had to stop because there was this picture of a guy in full Ezio Auditore Assassin's Creed robes standing on a roof in Florence, Italy. And I thought, I must be this man's friend. And he was on a student trip in college, and basically, like, he snuck out one morning, put on his full Ezio outfit, and went up on a rooftop and did a self-portrait of him sitting on a rooftop in Florence, Italy.
Cool.
And like, at that point, like, he had never been to the South. He had never met any of us. Charlie was like an hour drive, right? But he was one of those that he just flew down to hang out in the cabin in the woods. And I mean, we talk like all the time still. You know, in addition to work, I mean, like, you know, we're not just collaborators. You know, we're it's awesome to share your life with these people who've been such a huge part of it and have this artistic creation. But like, he's another one of those that, like, he was in college right when we first met and then graduated, and like now he's full time. And, you know, if you guys haven't interviewed him, he's a phenomenal person to talk to with all the really cool work he's done.
He's on our list.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we didn't get him in for the magazine, but we wanted to for the podcast. Mm-hmm. And you'd recommended him before too, so that's why he's on our list. So thank you again.
Absolutely.
Did you have a question, Josh? I'm sorry, I thought you were about to say something.
No, but I the community that you've put together, all these diverse people and from all over it's amazing. It's so neat to see this community come together, you know, all from, you know, stemming from when we were all kids in the backyard with a stick in our hands pretending we were whomever, Robin Hood, or, you know, it's fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous.
Well, thanks. Well, you know, the power of a good story, it has the ability to inspire. And it's incredible how, as different and unique as we humans are, how much we have in common, and how certain stories strike to the truth of the human heart and our emotions. And you know, it's incredible to be able to work, not just you know, part of the community is sharing and just enjoying those mutually, and then working with people who actively work to create new ones is really cool as well. So yeah. Very grateful.
You were going to ask about the trebuchet too, weren't you, Josh?
Well, yeah, I was going to get to that.
Sorry.
No, good. So tell us about the trebuchet.
I'm sorry.
We got an email one day that said, "Hey, I've got a trebuchet. It needs to be gone by 4 p.m. on Wednesday. You want it?" From somebody we didn't know. But we're the sort of people, I guess, that just have that look of I've got a spare trebuchet lying around.
I want to get an email like that.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, we drove up to this random school where it was a school project in Greenville, and he met us out there. It was super nice. Hey, welcome, guys. He's actually a Weekend Warrior player now. He comes and
cool.
But yeah, and so we put it in my backyard, and then so I have to explain that to neighbors, because there's something you got to understand is, like, there's people in my community that, like, understand Fell and Fair and what we do and how all that works. But I also have lots of friends in community and my church and local organizations and stuff that have no idea. Like, they just know me as a business person or something like that. They have no concept of what Fell and Fair is or does. So it's great to have people over for a cookout and there's a trebuchet in your backyard, and it's a great conversation starter. Yeah, so we finally got to use it for a couple videos. And then unfortunately it had some structural issues, so we ended up having to disassemble it. But it was great while it lasted. So
that's pretty fun.
Yeah, that is fun. We talked about building one ourselves with our little friend group here, and we haven't done it yet, but I don't know if it's because no one's ever really done that before. No one's been like, I've got the trebuchet experience.
No.
Well, it'll happen. No one our little, I mean, already I'm sure the neighborhood has seen our little group of people running around in cloaks and, with long bows and recurves and swords and battle axes and doing our
yeah.
own little photo shoots and things. I'm sure they've
matter of time. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
The trebuchet's coming. It's gonna happen.
Oh, it's just them again.
Yeah.
See, the problem that I have is, and I mean, the reason, Felon Fair started in the first place was I'm never satisfied with one, like 500 arrows, like I couldn't just, I couldn't just have one for me. I had to have one for me and all my friends. And so that we, and that's honestly how we kind of started our style initially with Felon Fair was I would not claim to be the greatest costume creator of all time, but we were able to combine, 5 or 6 costumes with 5 or 6 people who actually knew how to use the swords or use the bows, and they looked like they knew what they were doing. And so we were able to create this kind of mass effect so that our photography wasn't just a single model or a single outfit. It felt like a living story with multiple people interacting and engaging in it. But yeah, my next goal is I want multiple siege weapons so that we can use them at Weekend Warrior and find a safe way to lob giant like foam balls at each other or foam rocks for giant siege battles. So that's next to mine.
That's cooler than Punkin Chunkin, if you remember that.
A little safer too.
Right? Yeah. A lot safer.
Well, there's companies that make like foam combat safe rocks and stuff for, just like atmosphere and all. But we could just load a bunch of those up.
Right. Yeah. That'd make for some great video.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
So you have also been, because of Weekend Warrior, you have created factions and cultures for that. One of the new ones is the Wold. Is that correct? Can you tell us a little bit about how you decided to do that and what that does for Weekend Warrior?
So Weekend Warrior, it started out as a partnership between us and the Forge Studios in Virginia. Okay. And so we had a lot of input because we were basically hired to costume design the original event. But there was a lot of other kind of, voices talking in the creation of the original factions, where we have the Rangers, who are, the Rangers. Then we have like the Hearthguard, who are kind of Viking, like fantasy Viking inspired. Then we have the Kingsmen, who are kind of Knight Paladin inspired. And the Sea Lords, which are kind of Byzantine Navy inspired. Anglo-Saxon, Byzantine, Varangian Guard sort of look. And those have been around since 2017. So we had more formation or more work to form the Sea Lords, because at the time, Felon Fair only ran the Sea Lords. We didn't run anything else. And that was a really cool experience, especially to see it, develop over the years and that sort of stuff. But in the last couple of years, we've had the opportunity as we've grown to create more factions. And the reason we kept it, we basically got to the point where several of the factions had like 100 people before we started adding factions, because we want, like, the idea behind Weekend Warrior is it's not the sort of experience where you're like, this is a D&D party of like 4 amazing heroes and we all have superpowers and we're all going to go off on a quest. It's much more like you're Rider of Rohan number 6 in, at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields or at Helm's Deep. Like it's more feeling like you're a member of these big epic events as a member of the army, rather than you are Aragorn or, you are Aragon, or you are Luke Skywalker. So it's kind of a different approach that is not as usual with these sorts of events. But it's cool because it allows us to create basically 2 levels of story. The macro story, which is kind of what happens throughout the world, and then the micro story, which is what you as an individual get to do and accomplish and stuff within the game. So we have all sorts of questing system, and people can interact in all sorts of different ways. So as we grew and grew, we wanted to make it feel like an army. We didn't want it to be like, I grew up Revolutionary War reenacting, and there's always this politics and kind of toxic stuff going on with the groups. And so a group would get to like 12 people, then 2 people would get mad and they'd split off, and then those people would go to 12 and they get mad and they split off. So if you went to a Revolutionary War reenactment, there'd be like 12 British regiments, each who had 10 men. You're like, what regiment has 10 men? Like, you guys look silly right now. It would look way cooler if you had one regiment of 100 people. It would actually look like British formations actually looked. It wouldn't look like 10 people doing their own thing. So that was always kind of my thing, was I wanted to have these groups of like 100 people where it felt like a full company of troops. It felt like an army, and we have like speaking for the Sea Lords, like we have quartermasters and people in charge of, like, we have clerks, and we have like healers and doctors, and we have the whole spectrum of logistics personnel and people that like are like in a real army. Different. We have people that fight in the shield wall, people that are flankers, people that are archers, and so all of that to say, we kind of got to the point where we felt like we hit critical mass on some of these factions, so we decided to add new ones. And this was the opportunity for us to kind of really take it and do it by ourselves. So the first one we created was the Order of Luminos. It was kind of a mix of an inspiration of the Knights Hospitaller and the Jedi Knights, and kind of the Night's Watch from Game of Thrones. They're kind of these warrior monks, isolated, really cool armor. And we experimented for that. It worked really well. So we said, okay, it's time to start a couple new factions. And so we created two. The first is the Wold Folk, who are very inspired by kind of Celtic German tradition and myth, Germanic kind of people. Now, Weekend Warrior, the inspiration comes from kind of a combination of like the 9th to 14th centuries. So we definitely are a little more elastic in kind of our technology time frame. And these were a little earlier. So we had to figure out in the story, how do we, put like an Iron Age, like an early or a Bronze Age, even like culture into this kind of high medieval world. Right. So through the story, as the wars have been expanding, as the kingdom is now in it was a civil war for a while. Now it's straight up. There's 3 kingdoms that are all fighting. So we basically said the war has spilled over into this kind of deeply forested area, kind of Germany, Black Forest. And it's kind of, these people have been kind of left to themselves for thousands of years, or at least hundreds of years, are now kind of, they're kind of like the Ents, and like they didn't really have something in the fight, but now that the enemy's in their forest, or there's a battle in their forest, they got to pick a side and they got to do something. And so even the reason that we gave them the more antiquated armor and equipment was, we said, like, the reason these people have this land is they served a prior king who, in thanks for their services, basically released this legion and said, wait, your debt is paid. We'll give you this land for your services. So even the weapons and armor that they use is passed downs from like their great grandfathers who, took their armor and equipment into the woods and just never came out. And so that's the Wold Folk. And so they're cool. They use kind of the woad painting and stuff on their faces. And so they're a little more barbaric, a little more archaic feeling. And we've also just had it for years. We've had requests for a more Celtic Germanic style. So we thought it was a great opportunity to bring that in. The other faction we're starting is the Themesian Legion. And so the Themesians are basically, we've kind of teed them up for a couple of years by having the Themesian ambassador come and be at the event the last couple of years. And the Themesians are actually the people. So the part of the lore of the Sea Lords is that these were kind of an ocean-faring people, kind of like the Vikings that came over and kind of conquered a certain amount of territory that basically made a deal with the old king of the country and were kind of absorbed into the country. And as storms came up and technology was lost, they kind of got cut off from their homeland. There wasn't much coming and going anymore. Well, a couple hundred years later, the Themesians have made contact again. So there's this empire that all these people came from. So it would be like if, a bunch of Danes went to England, they were hanging out there, they had the whole Viking invasions, and then they didn't hear from Denmark for like 300 years. And technology improves, everybody kind of keeps going, and then the Danes show back up like, hey, we want to be friends. What are you guys doing? And so that's kind of who the Themesians are. And so because they come from this kind of established empire that hasn't had civil war for years, they haven't had all this sort of stuff, they have similar armor and equipment to the Sea Lords, but they have a lot of discipline. They fight in this phalanx of like this pike formation, so their armor is very uniform. So you have, with the normal factions, you have a lot of choice in how you want to take your inspiration and how you want to build your kit. For the Order and for the Themesians, for the Order of Luminos and for the Themesians, we have like almost a uniform that you have to follow. So that's for the people that really want to be like, and it was awesome. They were at our Training Grounds event, which is our smaller event. And it was like when the clone troopers show up, like it was awesome. They were just, they wear these little masks, and then they have these white robes with these white and black shields and these long spears. And they just showed up in the front of, every time, and like it was really cool. So it's been really neat to develop those. We're actually do we have time for me to tell a quick war story?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Absolutely.
So we're part of Training Grounds. This is supposed to be kind of a time out of the storyline where you're at a military training camp in the Kingdom of Oleron, and everybody's just learning battle tactics and that sort of stuff. And the reason we started this was because people would come to the Weekend Warrior experience. And, we have like 48 hours between noon on Friday and noon on Sunday to do the whole thing. So we don't spend a whole lot of time teaching you how to sword fight, teaching you how to fight as a unit, anything like that. We're just like, we got to hop right into the story. So we started realizing there was this need for this. So we started these events in the spring called training grounds, which is basically one of our friend jokes and calls it war camp. But it's basically war camp. You go and you learn how to swing a sword, and you learn how to fight in a shield wall. You learn how to act as a skirmisher. So the most recent one, we were practicing skirmishing tactics. So we were basically playing giant capture the flag with 4 flags across about 20 acres of property. So probably almost a half a mile in between the flags. It was a long way, a quarter mile. So it was a long way, and full of woods and hills and creeks and all this sort of stuff.
Awesome.
So we had kind of been at the stalemate all the first half of the battle. So I take a kind of elite unit, and I can't really do this in the fall when we're in character because I'm the leader of kind of the Sea Lords nation, and so I can't really just go sacrifice myself and die on random little quests and stuff. But this was my moment. I was like, it doesn't matter if I die. So I grabbed 5 stalwart Sea Lord hearts, and we left most of our armor, our shields. We just each had a weapon each. We're like, we got to go fast. We're going to do a crazy wide flank, and then we're going to sweep down, try to capture the enemy flag. But we're sweeping out super, super wide. Well, the enemy had the exact same idea. So we're sweeping through, and there's 5 of them, and then 12 Rangers and Kingsmen start coming the other way. And it takes about half a second to realize there's no way we're winning this fight. We got to get out of there. So we just turn around and we're booking it. Like I've never run down a hill in full armor faster. Like I was just slipping inside, and it was not dignified whatsoever. And arrows are flying past us. One of my guys jumps this creek, epic jump, and then gets shot in the back with an arrow. It's that slow Boromir music starts playing. We're running down the hill, and then another 12 Sea Lords and Hearthguard are coming up a bit. So I literally sprint past them, like, you guys take care of them. And we just go right past them. And then because they had done this to me earlier, and basically where we had advanced, and then they had kind of another Ranger unit had doubled back behind us, and they had actually ended up capturing our flag that way. So we got to the bottom of the hill, and I kind of looked around. I was like, well, the center of the army is battling up this way. The flank is now engaged over there, but their whole flank just went up that hill. So run right along the creek here. There's nobody here. So we start. I gathered up my survivors. I said, okay, guys, we're gonna keep trying. We're gonna try one more time. So we sneak through, we make it all the way through the lines. We jump the creek, and then we're looking at it, and the whole Woldfolk faction, which was only 4 people at the time, but there's and they've had these massive shields. And once again, we left all our shields and most of our armor behind. Massive shields, and then we have the Kingsman commanders there at the Kingsman flag, and 4 or 5 heavily armed Kingsmen, and we're just we ran half a mile through the forest in full armor. And there's nothing we can do. There's 5 of us, and and then we hear this huh, and we turn over, and there's 4 Themesians, and they're clone trooper armor, just running through, what are you guys doing here? It's that Spider-Man meme of wait, what are you guys doing here? We came to capture the Kingsman flag. You guys want to team up? Yeah, let's do it. And so we put them in the front with their big shields, and we kind of formed up behind them. We ended up pushing through. And me and another Sea Lord kind of got lucky over on the side. We killed the 2 Kingsmen that we were facing. And there was half a second where I realized nobody's watching me. So I just went and grabbed the flag and just booked it. I just ran. And then I looked behind, and all of my people died. Everybody.
Oh, no.
Kingsmen, Woldfolk just wiped them out. Absolutely. But 2 of them sacrificed themselves. I had learned later to basically run down the Woldfolk who were chasing me, and just give me enough time. And then I'm running out, and then I see Brandis, the Ranger faction leader. He sees me coming up from behind, so I see him. He's booking it through the woods, trying to intercept me. And then it was in a movie where 3 Sea Lords slid down the hill, and they're come over, cross the creek here, come with us. So I turned, ran over there, and then I started angling up the hill, and Brandis and some Rangers are coming up the hill, and then my guys slide in between them, and there's a scuffle, and people are slipping and rolling down the hill. And we had a moment of we had a safety pause. Hey, everybody okay? Everybody okay? Okay, cool, carry on. And I kept running. And that story was repeated 50 times across the battlefield with 50 different people as they all got to have their moments of cool excitement and meeting new factions that I had never fought the Woldfolk before. I'd never fought with the Themesians. I didn't know how that was going to go. But suddenly there they were, 4 of them just trooping through the woods with their shields and cool white clothing. So it's those sort of stories where that may or may not have impacted the total outcome of, especially in Large Weekend Warrior, the whole day or whatever. But it gives you that moment of like, I did something, I contributed. Even though I would like the next minute walk into the shield wall and die from an arrow instantly, it doesn't matter because you got to have that moment of that story. And so when it comes to those cool stories, Weekend Warrior has two parts. It has the battle during the day, and it has the time at the tavern feasting at night, and then around the campfires even. So that's a really important part of it because it allows you to tell your stories. It allows you to have those epic moments, whether it was, this is when I was fighting in the arena, what I did, or this is what I saw. I mean, one of the stories that gets told, everybody who was there from last year at Weekend Warrior, there were 20 people. It was probably their favorite moment where there was this one, there's actually the Woldfolk faction leader now, Rollo, big, strong dude. He's in the tavern and he's betting coins to people they're just taking wagers to arm wrestle. And then some of the order knights are like betting on them, and they're like, you're starting to build up this kind of because we have two types of currencies we use in the event. We have real money that so these coins we have that you can exchange for real money to buy, things from the tavern, to buy things from vendors. And then we have what's called blood coin, which is like kind of in-game currency that it doesn't have real monetary value. You just use it to exchange for things in-game. So people were betting all this blood coin on it. And so I walk by, and of course I'm the king of the other country. So, it's, come on. And I was like, no, look, believe me, I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. I'm not going to arm wrestle you. That would be a foolish task from the outset. So then I turn around, and my bodyguard, Omadi, who's 6'5", 280. I was like,
so he's a little guy.
Yeah. I mean, former tight end. I was like, hey, but I have a guy. And so like Omadi sits down, and like all of a sudden 20 people are just around that table, and people are betting blood coin, and the price is going up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And it was the epic arm wrestle battle. Like they were just locked there for minutes. At least that's what it felt like. And eventually Omadi won. There was great cheering. The Sea Lords won a bunch of coin. The Order guys' racket, was kind of disrupted. And it was just that, and everybody, like I've heard 5 or 6 people tell that story in different ways. And it was just an arm wrestling contest. Like it had no impact on the story. It didn't matter which kingdom did what, but it was that moment of like, I feel like I'm in this medieval tavern and I'm watching 2 huge dudes arm wrestle. So yeah, it's those sort of story moments that we love to create.
And it's that community that you're talking about. Yeah.
And you have shared experience now. You came from shared interest, and now you have shared experience. So
that is fabulous. Well, it's absolutely fabulous. We're going to be doing this. I'm just hanging right now. We're going to get some gear together. We've got to do this.
I think Kaz is with us on that. Who also mentioned a couple of things. I want to make sure we don't miss it. Who wears white in a forest? First of all, white clothing gives me anxiety. I think I can thank horses for that. And then, the one question was, do vendors do any trading like goods or other goods?
They're allowed to. I mean, you can do whatever you want. But for the most part, we use the coinage system just because the vendors are allowed to trade it back for real money at the end of the event. So they'll bring us sacks of coins and we'll trade it out for real cash. But it's nice because that way you don't have to walk around with a credit card. And it's just cool. Well, you have this money pouch and money's jingling in your pocket, like
the
you got
experience.
Yeah, we've got gold and silver and copper.
Immersion.
And they're like 10, 5, $1. And there's nothing cooler than just walking up to a tavern and just slapping down like a silver dollar or silver coin. Give me another barkeep. And that's just part of the aesthetic and the experience too.
Yeah, for sure.
So wonderfully immersive. We have got to do this. I'm sorry. I keep saying that we are doing this.
It'll happen.
Oh yeah.
Right. The question I had was I love how passionate you got telling that story, and I bet that everybody there gets probably at least as passionate telling their version of it.
Well, I also didn't tell you the story about how I got duped and drawn away from my flag and overrun completely, and the Rangers stole my flag. So I'll let them tell that story one day.
Wow. That's their favorite part?
That is their favorite story. Yeah.
What is part of the process of creating that gets you the most excited? Is it that community or like that community experience?
Yeah, it's there is something about that moment of like, and like I had this. I wasn't expecting this in my first weekend warrior experience. Like I said, I was brought in as basically an actor and a costume designer. So I was like, you know what? I like sword fighting people. I'll do that. Like I don't really buy it. Like I didn't play D&D before. I didn't really buy into the role playing thing. But it's like I can play a character. I'm an actor. I can do that. So there was this moment we had of the first night where the king was poisoned and dies. And then there's like, all of a sudden just everything erupts into chaos and there's fingers pointing everywhere. And I had to get up and kind of make this speech to kind of placate people. And that was like my, oh, this is real moment. Not like in a dangerous or bad way, but like in a, like I'm into this. Like I care how this goes. And I care about what I can do to shift people in, in ways that help the story move forward and stuff. And I think everybody has that moment at some point that it's, it's the kind of the, oh, this is real moment. And that's really cool. And I love seeing that. Like, honestly, I love the medieval stuff. I like, it is beautiful when you design a faction and you see 4 of them trooping through the woods to come help you, like that's cool. But what I really value and where I get the most reward from is the messages that I get of the people that I talk to and just talk about the way the community has impacted their lives and the way the experience has impacted their lives. And, like, honestly, Weekend Warrior, like I have done a lot of hard and difficult things in my life. And Weekend Warrior is the hardest one I have done. I have had more people angry and upset at me. I have had people go on video rants talking about what a terrible person I am. And I've had like personal threat, anytime you try to do anything, people will you're going to get pushback, right?
Sure.
And I have lost years of my life and months of sleep stressing over Weekend Warrior. It has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life because it's something that people care about and they're passionate about it. And if something doesn't go the way they want, or if, they feel like the impact that it has, or like it's going in a direction they're not, they can't be on board with, or if it's something like, even just a disagreement over a policy or something like that. Like I have stressed and I have been this close to quitting it so many times, but what keeps me in it is the people and just how I have seen how much people love it, because that's 1% of people. That is the 1% that are going to cause trouble anywhere they go. Nothing is ever going to be good enough for them. They're never going to be happy. There was a really stressful time I was going through a couple years ago, where I was really in this tough spot, and I was talking to one of my really wise friends, Sarah Johannes, who runs Kate and Crown. It's a really cool women's clothing brand. And she said, Zan, look at all your heroes like in history. Look at William Wallace, Robert the Bruce, Alfred the Great. Every single one of them was hated by somebody, and usually a lot of people. And all of them, somebody tried to kill, and some of them they succeeded and they died. But that doesn't mean they were doing the wrong thing. And it doesn't mean that, it wasn't worth doing. And that when I say stories matter and that's what I mean. Because one thing I love about Alfred the Great, who was kind of the first unifying king of England. So I have a autoimmune disorder, and it's called ulcerative colitis. And Alfred the Great had ulcerative colitis. Oh. And it stopped my military career. He still had to be king in the middle of a Viking invasion. And, so having a man that brave and noble and courageous who had my same disability and being able to look and see. And if you haven't read The Ballad of the White Horse, G.K. Chesterton's great epic poem about Alfred, it's amazing. He gets really maligned in a lot of modern TV and movies, and I don't know why, because history pretty much agrees he's probably one of the greatest kings of all time. But anyway, so that's when I say stories matter, is because in that moment I had a friend who knew those stories well enough who could say, Zan, look at this stuff that you have been soaking up for 30 years. And look at these heroes that you had that lived and died for what they knew was right and for trying to do a good thing. And they suffered for it. If you're doing the right thing, you will make people upset. You will. And you know what? Some of that's inevitable. And sometimes also we're human and we screw stuff up. But we can't let a mistake get us down to the point where we're not willing to, get back up to the line and go to it again. So when we say stories matter, when we, study history and we have people like Robert the Bruce, or we have people who, I mean, he had everything taken from him. His wife was in prison, being threatened constantly. His home was burned. He actually burnt his own castle so the English couldn't have it. He was on the run, hiding in the swamps and the fens of Scotland. William Wallace, very similar thing. Alfred the Great, they spent a lot of time hiding in swamps, all these heroes of mine. Living in South Carolina, that's probably not a good omen for me. But knowing those stories and what those men endured, and then having amazing fantasy stories like Lord of the Rings. I mean, so this is one of my favorite mugs by Will Donovan from Donovan Pottery. And you can see it has kind of a Gondorian-inspired tree and crown. And then it says, right under here, it says, "Lead with hope." And he gave this to me about 6 months ago when I was just dealing with another situation that was just causing me in some ways to despair. What to him, what encapsulated Aragorn was a guy who just had hope, and he just kept leading with this constant, belief in good, and that, his people could do what they needed to do. And that if they failed, they'd be failing doing the right thing. And so this is there's a reason I'm drinking. It's been a hell of a 3 days. So there's a reason I'm drinking from this mug tonight. But that's what you always have to remember. And for those of you who need to check out Donovan Pottery on Instagram, he'd be another great one. Folks, his work is beautiful. And he gets it too. He's one of those people that knows the value of a story. And pottery has been his way of bringing that. All the pots and the mugs and stuff you see in our feasting videos and stuff, like he does that.
Cool.
And he's another one of those that joined us about 5-6 years ago as an amateur, and now is a full-time. It's an amazing studio here in Greenville. It's honestly, Weekend Warrior is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but it is the thing that I've done that is the most worth doing. And Meg Sanders, who's our executive director, she would tell you the exact same thing. She was pulled out of her her son's first birthday party over an issue on Friday night. And she still gets up to the plate and she still goes for it. We've just got an awesome team who has seen the impact this has on people's lives, who've been able to live these stories, and who are willing to literally spend their bodies and souls to make sure that the people that will be impacted by it can be impacted by it.
Yeah, that is awesome. And clearly you're making an impact. You have, I looked at some of the videos before we went live tonight, and I was reading through some of the comments on your videos. Well, it was on Instagram that I was on. And the comments are also inspirational and awesome and entertaining. And the online community is amazing too. Yeah. There's a video of someone, I think it was one of the last 6 videos I think that was posted, and someone's running in chainmail, and someone commented that someone was running, that was running in full chainmail. And I thought, it never occurred to me that would be something to running in chainmail is kind of a big deal.
Yeah. That was a long day.
Yeah.
We were shooting on Thursday, and we had to shoot this scene where I'm having this conversation while standing next to my horse. And I was an idiot because I wrote a scene where I have to be in full armor, having a conversation. I had to get my horse to stand still for 2 hours, which anybody who knows anything about horses,
Yep,
knows that's not going to happen.
That's tough.
Then on hour 3 of it being 80 degrees, full armor, and you can't even you're wearing gloves, you got a helmet on, you can't even see everything, you can't touch everything. You got this 1,000-pound animal that has a will of its own, and trying to deliver lines. And there's moments where you're just like, I'm an idiot. What am I doing? But that's the real deal. In real life, that conversation would have took, 3 minutes, and it wouldn't have mattered if the horse moved. But for camera continuity, we had to keep
of course, yeah.
But yeah, that's when we say we really do this stuff. You're right. It's and wearing chainmail is its own knack too. I mean, that's just something your body has to get used to. But and it really encourages us when people appreciate that, and when they see this guy spent all afternoon in Anderson, South Carolina, running up and down hills in chainmail. That matters. So, yeah.
Yeah, the place too, because I mean, it's not 80 degrees here in Minnesota, but certainly that matters too.
Well, a lot of times we'll get comments from people saying, like people in medieval Europe, they wore more wool than they wore linen. Why are you wearing a linen cape? It's like, have you ever run around in a cloak in South Carolina in July?
It's got to be linen.
Wear wool. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Actually, I have, and linen it has to be.
We have. We try to make all our materials all of our garments and equipment out of period accurate materials. So wool, leather, linen. And we use 100% European flax linen. We actually have had some supply issues because it all comes from Ukraine. So that was a great day. Let's talk about leading with hope. When your supplier calls up and said, hey, so we need to tell you this. Like, what is it? Our fabric warehouse is in Ukraine. And you're like, okay, so supply chain is going to be a little interrupted there. Thankfully, all that stuff worked out. We were able to get continuous good supply and everything. But, using real authentic materials can have its challenges and difficulties too. But we do a lot of linen cloaks as opposed to wool, just because for most people, when you're wearing them around a Ren fair, like they're as much aesthetic as they are functional. And especially in the summer and, early fall, late spring, you want that lightweight material, but we're still making them out of a authentic material. We also have our wax canvas capes, which are really great because they're water repellent. I wish we could get linen canvas. We'll use cotton canvas because that's all they have. But those are really functional too. So it's a great, if it is hot, but you want that rain repellent sort of stuff. Like we had our most recent training grounds and we saw it was going to be raining the first 2 hours when we were checking everybody in and stuff. And so we're like, all right, grab the wax canvas cloak and Amy and Brenda were sitting out of the front checking everybody in and their wax canvas cloaks. Like, this is the best ad we could ever have. It's our people, it rains and they just put on their wax canvas and they stand out in the rain and they're fine. So
yeah.
People that actually do it.
That's how it would have been, right?
Yeah.
I see Josh's wheels turning.
Oh, yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Kaz said it keeps your horse dry, too.
Yeah, and it's nice, too, because like you get this cool sway over the back and the rump of the horse over its hindquarters. And it also is nice if you don't have medieval saddles. It actually covers a lot of the backside of a Western or English saddle, too, which is very convenient.
Smart. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the wheels are definitely turning. I've been perusing your shop and your website and everything else for years now. I've been looking at your products and everything else, and I've got a list, and it's about as long as my arm. But yeah, and just great looking stuff. I'm definitely getting my hands on some of this.
Oh.
I'm sure you. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
See, we have an offer to bring a horse to Weekend Warrior. We're not there yet, but we will be one day. We're going to figure out how to do an equestrian something. So I have this idea how we could incorporate cavalry into Weekend Warrior. As long as the liability insurance guys say it's okay, we're going to figure that out one day. But
I want to be there for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I feel like I had a question I was going to ask you. I like to ask certain people this question, but I feel like maybe you answered it. So I'm going to ask it anyway, and you can just tell me if you did or if maybe there's another answer. What is something about what you do that just hands down makes you go, yes, this is why I do what I do?
Honestly, I have to be reminded of how special and wonderful it is, because I get so objective focused that I'm just like, gotta finish. There was one time I remember very distinctly a couple years ago where we were filming this scene where we'd do this cavalry charge. And so I'm in full armor. I've been in full armor for like 7 hours at this point. And we were basically going up to one side of this field, sprinting 100 yards, turning around, getting all the horses round back up, formed up, doing it again, trying not to hit the infantry guys on the ground that we're pretending to ride through, all this sort of stuff. And I'm a producer of this too. So I'm like, is our crew going to have lunch in time? What's our schedule looking like? Are we going to shoot in the afternoon? Is it going to rain? And one of our friends kind of nudged his horse over to me, kind of decides like, hey man, we're living the dream. It's like, what? It's like, we're living the dream right now, man. Like we're riding in a cavalry charge. Like, just take a moment and like just enjoy it. And so some of those times, like even I rode. I just have a little mile route that I rode real quick the other day after filming because I was so pissed off at my horse that, you know, and I was just like tired and hot and sweaty. I was like, no, I still got all my armor on, but I'm going to go and I'm going to ride out and back. I'm just going to enjoy the fact that I'm riding a horse in full armor, looking like a rider of Rohan, and it's awesome. And I think as I began, I was all about getting the next sword or the next cloak or making the next thing. And don't get me wrong, there's still those moments of like, wow, we just made this really awesome thing and it makes me feel really good. But as we've grown and as I've stepped away from the manufacturing role, I'll step into the shop to help every once in a while, but I don't make anything anymore. Where I find that joy, where I find that encouragement is just from seeing people's lives. I mean, whether it's like little wins, like having one of your, like being able to give one of your employees a raise, or meeting somebody at an event that says, hey, I followed you for years. And I remember this post you did 3 years ago, and it really impacted me when I was in a dark time. Or, meeting people at Weekend Warrior that says, hey, I found you through TikTok and I never would have tried something like this, but you made it seem accessible. And now I have all these new friends. And it's those sort of moments that I'm disciplining myself to reflect on and enjoy more. And I wish I was better at it, honestly. And then there's times too where you'll just sit and you'll turn on a great song and you'll just sit there and cry for 15 minutes. Like I spent all Saturday just reading the Ballad of the White Horse and just crying. It was great. And one of the things that I really wish I could do is like one day in heaven when I get the ability to just like, I don't know, do whatever I can do with unlimited powers. I don't know, maybe, I don't know what the options are. But anyway, one day we get to do this. We're like I have been able to be in a cavalry charge. Like I have stood with a shield wall of 100 people as we have crashed into the enemy shield wall. I have, given a battle speech before my troops before we made a desperate charge. Tolkien never got to do that. C.S. Lewis never got to do that. G.K. Chesterton never got to. They were academics and they were in real wars and but they were in the most horrible war that ever existed. And their experience of war was this mud and the blood and the misery and the death and the trench foot and the mustard gas. But they dreamed of Alfred Stand at Ethandune, and they dreamed of Theoden's charge at the Pelennor Fields. And I would have loved, if I ever get the chance, like I would love to have just a small troop of folks in like Rider of Rohan Anglo-Saxon gear, and just like ride up over the White Horse in Wessex with those three guys and be like, hey, this is what it would have looked like. Like, this is what chainmail feels like. This is what it feels like to swing a Viking sword. This is what holding a lance in rest feels like. Like, enjoy it. And that's the experience. We can't give that to Tolkien. We can't give that to Lewis. We can't give that to Chesterton. These men that inspired us and just created these amazing stories. But we can give that to you. We can give that to anybody. And, I think for a lot of people, they have that moment of the first, like when the adrenaline hits in the shield wall and like the arrows start flying over and everybody ducks down a little bit, that like, oh boy, like this is way bigger than me moment. And you know what? It's not real war. Like I spent the first 7 years of my adult life training for the real thing. And I know it's not, and there's all sorts of other, like, I don't want to over romanticize that sort of stuff too, because there's all sorts of horror and suffering and pain in that too. But I find it interesting that people like Tolkien and Lewis, who suffer through literally the worst war in human history, and this is where I think being a romantic really, really shows, because I don't think being a romantic or appreciating the romantic element and stuff is denying the bad, but it's focusing on the good. And it's being able to take the beauty and the joy from the trenches of World War I, from the mustard gas, but seeing the courage of those men, seeing the self-sacrifice and the nobility, and then, studying the wars of history and seeing all the courage and nobility and chivalry there. And men like Tolkien and Chesterton and Lewis, and Patrick O'Brien and so many others that have written these amazing stories. They were able to seize on that. Not that they denied the realities of the horror and that sort of stuff, but it's what I also find very different from, like, for example, the writings of Tolkien versus like George R. R. Martin. One day I want to write like a white paper or an essay on the difference between the two, because interestingly enough, J.R.R. Tolkien was in the absolute worst war that men have ever created, and yet his heroes find war necessary, and they go about fighting it in the most noble and honorable way possible. George R. R. Martin was a draft dodger in Vietnam, and the way he writes all his characters is war is the mud and the blood and the refuse, and it's all horrible, and there's no nobility, and there's no honor, and there's no pride, and there's no courage in it. It's all just, yeah. And don't get me wrong, I think Game of Thrones is a masterpiece, but there's a distinctive kind of, perspective that's very different there. Interesting for people. Like, the other thing that I also found was very interesting was George R. R. Martin, who, never really got married, had a very kind of tangled love life through the years, and every marriage relationship is just super jacked up in Game of Thrones. Like, there's none of them where you're like, this is the people I want to be. Like, we can all think, oh, I would love to be in the Shire, I would love to be in Gondor, I'd love to be in Rohan. Nobody thinks I would really like to be one of the Tullys, or I'd really like to live at King's Landing. You're like, no, that sounds horrible.
You're right.
And yet, Tolkien, who basically met this girl when they were teenagers and then fell in love with her, and he considered her the most beautiful woman to ever live. If you look at pictures of her, she was kind of average looking, but he was so in love with her, and all these marriage relationships pretty much in Tolkien's world are just wonderful. And they're supportive, and they're encouraging, and they are passionate about each other, and they sacrifice for each other. And like that, Tolkien, his marriage went through a lot of hard stuff. They had kids, and they had issues, they had all sorts of stuff, but he still was able to find the beauty and the joy and the hope and the connection in that. And he didn't just relegate it to, well, if mine didn't work out, nobody's can. And that's what I think true romanticism is. And I think it's what we try to do, is say, hey, there's lots of bad stuff, and we're going to acknowledge that, but there's a lot of good. And if we focus on that, then I don't like to use the term manifest, because I feel like there's a lot of other connotations there.
Yeah.
But working with a common goal and a common objective, we are able to take things that are ugly and or just ordinary and turn them beautiful. I was taking an acting class recently from a guy named Stephen Dorn, who's really great. But he was talking about, is like, whenever he talks about a love, like if you have a love relationship, he calls it a scrambled eggs moment, which was like, there's all sorts of epic moments with relationships and this sort of stuff, the proposal or the how you met stories, but nobody's like, when you're talking to an old man who never says, I miss my wife because of that one time I did this awesome proposal, or that one time we were on this cool yacht. He says, no, I miss the fact that she made me scrambled eggs every morning for 60 years. That's what Tolkien was able to do. It's the strawberries and cream. It's the rosy cotton dancing. It's not the, remember, Mr. Frodo, that time that I killed the spider and it was really epic. It was, remember, Mr. Frodo, like the Shire and rosy cotton dancing. And that's what we do.
That was so well said.
Thank you.
I'm clipping that. So can you summarize that? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That was a joke from earlier. This is that silent part where we're still absorbing it because it's so good.
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say I don't even have any words at the moment because I'm still soaking that in. It's fabulous.
Well,
that's right on, though. I see that you are doing that, and how awesome it is that you see that in real time. you know, you mentioned how difficult sometimes it is for you to be present in the moment. Like, we're living the dream on the battlefield. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I was thinking about all the other things that I have to think about right now, too. Yeah. And I can relate to that. I think a lot of people can. That being present in the moment is... I struggle with the podcast even. I have 27 tabs open and 6 different windows, and I'm looking at volume levels, and I'm looking at, you know, I have Twitch over here, and if you could see this, and I forget that, you know, I get to talk to Zan Campbell today. Here we are, living the dream, and all of our other guests, and so there was a time when I had to learn that lesson and stop and go, okay, whew. Yeah. I'm not just running like a podcast and all of the technical side of it. I am sitting here having a conversation with somebody I was really excited to have a conversation with, and I need to be present here and pay attention to that and absorb that, because otherwise it's over and it's not the same. So taking that moment to go, okay, woosah or whatever, and being there. But you did that just there with your own fell and fair world. Like, you are present in the fact that you understand, you have a goal, you understand it, and you see and feel and also experience the impact, which I think is so cool. That you get to live it alongside the people that you built it with.
Yeah, and we get to introduce new people to it all the time. And some people, you know, their interaction is with us is 10 minutes, or it's 30 seconds when they scroll through a TikTok. And, you know, and it's hard because, you know, for even like social media stuff, that's still kind of my domain. And, you know, we'll be filming and I'll be thinking about safety things, and I'll be thinking about, are we getting people enough water, and are we going to be done in time, and how long is this going to take to edit? And then, you know, then I have to go and I put all the captions in, and I have to put all the stuff, and then I have to put it up. And then it's like, okay, now I've got to go counsel an employee who has a question, or I need to go, you know, pay the bills, or, you know, file the taxes, or whatever. And like I said, I wish I was better at it than I am. And one of the things I actually really enjoy about having the opportunity to go on a podcast or talk to new people about it is I get to enjoy it again in a fresh way. And I get to revel in it a little bit, in ways that, like, if you were just sitting around doing it by yourself, it'd be kind of egotistical. You're just like, oh, this is how, like, wonderfully I impact people's lives. Wow, that's really amazing. You know, but when you share it with somebody, then they're enjoying it, you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I think it gives them perspective too, because, like, if you're anything like me, like, I always see, like, I'm my own worst critic, and I see all the flaws first. So I will walk away from a Weekend Warrior event being like, man, food was 30 minutes late, and this went wrong, and we didn't have enough of these, and that person showed up late, and this person got mad at that person, so now I've got to resolve that dispute. And they'll be coming up, just, I had the most amazing 48 hours of my life. It's like, really? Because food was 30 minutes late. And didn't you notice it rained like halfway through, and we had to cancel the battle like halfway, you know? No, like, they don't care.
That didn't matter.
Yeah, you know, and I get all caught up in those details. And a lot of times it's hard for me to kind of, but one thing I really enjoyed about we had two training grounds events for the first time this year. We're actually gonna have 3 next year. Was by having those, because I'm less involved in the story, I can just go play. I can enjoy it. So I haven't had one of those cool battle stories in quite a while. So it was fun to be able to get one of those again. And my team has been huge in that too. And I got to say this too, like, my ability to enjoy stuff is now basically solely because people like Kat and Amy and Lauren Kay and Robert have stepped up and are just taking whole sections of the company and just doing amazing things with them, because I couldn't do it all by myself. And there were periods where I was working 12, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, 7 days a week for months at a time. And I knew I had a biological ticking time bomb that, like, I just, you know, I basically had to get across the line where I could afford enough people to take over before I passed out. And I think we did it. There's still a lot, but it's a lot more manageable now. And they give me the opportunity to sit back and not have to be Meg, who is executive director of the Weekend Warrior event. She's also my sister and a total badass. She's also like a professor of, she's a professor of English, but she specializes in medieval English literature and myth. So she runs our events, but you literally have a professor of myth running your
cool.
mythological event. And she's also, one hell of a spear fighter. But she says growing up with 3 brothers made her self-defense instincts very, very sharp.
I believe that.
See that.
Yeah. But people like that just carry so much of a weight, and that I can go to, and it's not just me sitting there and wondering how am I going to solve this problem. It's there's people that are taking that weight and that are carrying it for me, and that it's also, I think, when you have a organization that's your brainchild and it's your baby, it's also hard sometimes to believe that other people believe in it as much as you do, and that other people are willing to sacrifice for it the way you're willing to sacrifice for it. So it's really cool to see those people stepping up and doing that and giving their lives away and sacrificing and dedicating time, effort, energy, resources to a cause they believe in. And it's not just this insane thing going on in your brain. It's other people are willing to sacrifice years of life in the form of stress to see this thing that is worth doing happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Relatable too. From the chat, Brave New Tarkle jumped on and said, as someone who goes to Weekend Warrior, I can say that Zan runs a very excellent event.
Thank you.
And and earlier I wanted to mention this. Kaz said we were embroiled in another topic. I want to make sure. She said something about horses. There we go. I found it. I'm sorry. Can I bring my horse to Weekend Warrior? And then you answered you're working on that. And then she said, if you do hit me up, I train all my horses to handle that. And then, which was the, being in battle.
Yeah.
Because that's a spooky
a whole other thing for a horse.
Yeah. Yep. And then she asked, wait, are you the guy that dressed up as Obi-Wan Kenobi in one of your social media posts?
I am. Know that.
So yes, and that was a question we had.
Awesome.
Of course I know him. He's me.
Perfect. Well done.
Are you behind many of the mashups?
Yeah, like that. I would say that's kind of my brainchild still.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll have the team will come up with a really good idea and stuff, but I think that's kind of just the way my brain works. Lauren Kale say, Zan, cook us up a Zan special. And which is just, you just pull something out of your butt. And, sometimes they fail horribly and nobody else gets this really niche humor.
Sure.
But, sometimes they take off. And but, a lot of times you'll put a lot of time and effort and energy into one of them. You're like, this is genius. And, 30,000 views, maybe 100 comments. And then you'll post something really stupid or something you put 30 seconds of thought into, 4 million views, 30,000 shares. Like, what's the formula here, man? So, yeah.
Well, as Kurt Ward would say, it's not niche, it's esoteric.
Well,
arcane.
It's just a really small audience. That's okay.
But I think there's a lot of value to having a niche. And, because like people, so we have this playlist that we put on one of our cups. It's cool. Yeah, Will Donovan actually made these cups, and then he made these decals for them, and it has a little Spotify code where you can actually scan it, and it'll bring up a Spotify playlist. And
I saw that. That's right. I wondered how that worked. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What thought process goes into making this playlist? Because there's nothing because it's like some video game soundtracks, it's some movie soundtracks, some of which are medieval, some of which are not. It's some different music from folk tunes, and I was like, it's what brings us joy, and it's what brings our special mix of people who love Master and Commander and Scottish stuff and Lord of the Rings and medieval things and Robin Hood and Gladiator and the Romans and cool folk songs about love and home and family and sea shanties. And, it's a weird niche, group that you'd have to read a certain weird combination of books to even like get into the range. But it's fun too, because we'll make, we'll throw up a small Master and Commander reference, and it'll be like, there's literally people that are our staff now who are like, oh yeah, the reason I'm here is because one time you made a niche Master and Commander reference, and I got it, and or the niche, Wheel of Time reference, or some strange historical thing that is just, why would you know? Well, if you're our people,
right?
And if you miss that one, there's more to come. So yeah.
But there was this one little thing you said, and Brave New Tarkil said sea shanties is a food group.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, this is absolutely speaking to our tribe. I mean, the music, the eclectic mix of things. I mean, this is all us. This is perfect. I think.
Yeah, and it's cool, as we've seen this community grow in multiple levels too, because we've got the people who engage, like Weekend Warrior. We have the larger ring of internet and social stuff. Now that we've been in Greenville for several years, we get to partner with local businesses. So we work with Wandering Bard Meadery, who makes a special mead. 13 Stripes Brewery, we have a special beer with 13 Stripes every year. Bridge City Coffee. So we have a special coffee. It's just like, what does beer and mead and coffee and pottery and cloaks have in common? Well, nothing and everything. They are all the tools you need to tell a story. And if I don't have coffee, I'll die.
I feel the same way.
Yeah. And but even meeting Greg and the Bridge City folks, like we sat down for the first time, like we are the same people. Like we care about people in the same way. We care about stories in the same way. We care about well-made, handcrafted things that enrich people's lives the same way. So we're like, well, we got to have a Fell and Fair Bridge City coffee. And then we made this hilarious marketing campaign around it, which is just awesome. Which, if you guys have ever seen a chance to watch the Sir Fair videos. Oh, so Omadi, the character that was arm wrestling, that's Sir Fair. So his character is Omadi in the games. So in that arm wrestling, imagine that guy who's just huge. He was my stand-in for arm wrestling. His name's Justin Bishop, who also runs his own company as well. So we have all these small businesses, people that are craftsmen, people that care about just really well-made things. And it goes back to the romanticism. I mean, the well-made, handmade thing is not going to be as efficient. It's not going to be as, cost-effective. It's not going to be, sometimes like it's not even going to be the thing that lasts forever. I mean, if you sew something with a sewing machine, it's probably going to last longer than if you hand sew something. But it's the care and the love and the attention and the heart of the artist that's poured into it, whether that's a sip of coffee or a drink of beer, or the pot you're drinking it out of, or the cloak you're wearing while you do it. And every one of those is made just with care and love and by people who actually, that's what I love, like talk with Michael Robinson, who runs 13 Stripes. Like that man freaking loves beer and he loves people. And like, it's just amazing to see, because like I like beer, but like I don't love beer. He loves beer. Like in the making of beer, like the way I get into arrows, like he's in the beer. And same thing with Greg from Bridge City and those folks. And also it's so cool to see these masters of their craft work. Like these people are just experts. Like watch Charlie forge a knife or Will throw a pot. And you think this would take me years to figure out. And yet for them, it's just this masterful, it's art in itself to watch them work. And that's just such a cool experience. One of the things that I would love to have, one day is I'd love to build a permanent location for Weekend Warrior and build out structures and villages and all that sort of stuff. But I'd love it to be built by the people that work in it and are part of the event. So like I want, the wrought iron work to be done by the blacksmith in the forge in the village. I love the dishes in the tavern to be made by the potter from the village. I love, for at the tavern, when you go and you buy a steak or you buy a meat pie, I'd love it to be by cows that are raised by the cattle farmer who lives in the village, because I think that would add that extra level of like, we're doing the real thing. So if anybody has like $100 million and wants to sponsor us, that's the plan one day.
Yeah, as soon as we win the lottery, or
just buy a bunch of cloaks, folks.
Just yeah, I think that would be more feasible.
Cloak the whole world.
Brave New Targo said, a weekend warrior commune.
Don't use the word commune. That is a negative connotation.
There are, yeah. Kaz said, I'll let you build it on my farm. Kaz is in like Kentucky or something. I forgive me if I don't remember correctly. Kentucky. Yes, Kentucky. Yep. I was right. Nice. So do you have any advice for anybody who has never done anything like this before? You know, they went to the Renaissance Festival, but they didn't even wear a costume. And so this is, maybe they're a little timid or they don't know what they're doing. Yeah. Do you have any advice for a newbie?
I'll say this. I learned entirely from the University of YouTube. Like, I watched YouTube video after YouTube video. I never took a sewing class. I never took a leatherworking class. I never took a costume design class, and I'm a full-time costume designer. And so you can learn all that stuff. We've done what we can to kind of sponsor, and create content like that and then help it be created. But there's so much out there. And then even if it's something like Weekend Warrior, we have a huge website that every faction has like costume recommendations and information on the aesthetic, and just go down that rabbit hole. We have Pinterest boards for every faction. We have them for D&D classes, all sorts of stuff on our Pinterest. We have tons of resources for that sort of thing. Also, like if you can even, one thing there's a temptation to want to start at the top. Like, I'm going to show up to Weekend Warrior and I'm going to have the most amazing kit ever. Like, don't. Show up in the basics. Get a cloak, a tunic, pants, boots, the basics, a sword, and come and have fun. And then you will, like, one thing we always say is, like, even if you don't come with a friend, you will leave with friends at Weekend Warrior. And so you will be part of a community and part of a brotherhood after that. And so you'll have tons of resources. There's whole Discord servers and, stuff on costuming for the factions. So you're like, I'm a Sea Lord. Well, there's whole Sea Lord, Discord costuming channels and stuff. So even for a group of, there's maybe 130 Sea Lords, like between that knowledge, like there's all this content, all these people that work really hard. Tarkle's one of them. And so, people can give you good advice and good help. A friend is much more helpful than all the resources in the world too. So finding somebody who you connect with and can give you some pointers and stuff is a great way to do that too. So research, Weekend Warrior website is great. And also feel free, you can always email us at weekendwarrior@felonfair.com or contact@felonfair.com. We can give you, we've had plenty of people say, hey, I like this stuff and I don't know where to start. Can you give me a shopping list? Or can you give me the basics of what I would need to show up to Weekend Warrior? Or what can I make and what can I buy and where can I buy it? Because one thing too is we've always tried to manage quality with accessibility. So like we understand, like we're the premier brands on this stuff. Like we're Rolls Royce. So we understand that a lot of times people won't or can't start here. They don't even know if they like this stuff yet. So we also are happy to help people find ways to get. I'm actually meeting with Renee Verrent, who is the CEO of Epic Armory, which is like, they are like the Toyota of the industry. They are just like everybody can afford it, works solidly. And he's coming to visit this week, and we're going to be hanging out and talking about how can we collaborate and work together to help people get into the industry, because, he's the entry level. We're like the next step. And so how can we help him get more people into the industry, and how can he send people to us when they're ready to, to grow in their costuming and that sort of stuff. So cool. The people that are working, like, we think about this stuff and we think about how to help folks and try to, make this stuff accessible. So they're like, if you're going to buy a Felon Fair thing, buy our boots, buy our tunic, buy our cloak, buy pants from Goodwill. Like, you can buy pants from us and they're amazing. Like, there was a moment I was fighting a guy at training grounds who the last 2 times I fought him, he split his pants. And I was like, if you invested in a pair of Felon Fair pants, it probably wouldn't happen. It's not just me. I had nothing to do with the pants splitting. I will note that too. But but like really, like, get a pair of linen pants off Amazon for $35 and put your money in a good tunic. So like we can tell you that sort of stuff. Now if you can, if you want to get one of our pair of pants, we'll happily sell you one. But a lot of times, felt like even from the beginning, one thing that I learned was kind of the 80-20 rule with Fell and Fair stuff, which is put the 80 or the majority of your resources into the 20% of stuff that's really going to be seen and really matters, and then the rest can just kind of like fill in. As long as it doesn't look terrible, nobody's going to notice it. So like for years we used women's fashion tall riding boots because they were $35 on Amazon, and from 3 directions they look good, so we just didn't show the zipper on them. And eventually we were able to design our own boot and hide the zipper and that sort of stuff. But little things like that there's ways. But then like we never skimped on tunics and cloaks. Like you got to get good tunics and cloaks. So all those sorts of things are sort of the other thing is we learned because we wasted so much money. We made so many mistakes. So I want to save people from. There's times where I'll tell you, buy a Fell and Fair tunic, because believe me, I bought and made so many tunics. I probably made 7 tunics before I made one that stayed together. And so, I've made the mistakes. I want to save you money, but then I'll tell you, buy Goodwill pants, buy Amazon pants. That's going to be your better option.
That's
and
awesome.
I'd rather see you get into the industry than see you all decked out in Fell and Fair stuff at your first event.
Cool. That is solid.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how to connect with you would, I'm sorry. Let me go back. Valgus Ordo said they're comfortable and battle tested. And Brave New Tarko said, we walk edition epic armory weapons. Sorry.
We've thrown the idea about. We'll see.
We'll see. You never know with Zan Campbell, what he's got up his sleeve. His tunic
Probably
sleeve.
a knife. Literally in this case.
So to connect with Zan and Fell and Fair, you can go to fellandfair.com, or you said also weekendwarrior.com.
weekendwarriorexperience.com. And then our shop is shop.fellandfair.com.
Okay. Yes. And you can get there from fellandfair.com as well, I believe. Yep. And also on Facebook and Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok too. Mm-hmm. You can find Fell and Fair. They're everywhere. If you haven't found them by now.
And Pinterest.
Pinterest. Okay. Yeah. So go find them, follow them, and jump in and be part of it with your Goodwill pants.
Yeah. I'd love to see you there. Bring a spare pair, maybe.
Yeah, bring it in case you split them.
Yeah.
And maybe a needle and thread just in case. So to wrap up this episode along with possibly every episode, always in perpetuity, is in memory of Joe Capone, who was our moderator, fellow comedian, curmudgeon, critic, and our great friend and encourager. Find us pretty much wherever you tune into podcasts. For updates, announcements, and more, please visit us on social media under Modern Romantic. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Again, Zan, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming. It's been great.
It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you. We'll have to have you back sometime.
Love to.
Okay. Have a good night, everyone.